Hello and welcome to Antinatalism this week. The American Philosophy Association works for promoting philosophy as a discipline and as a profession. They had a conference where there was a paper presented criticizing antinatalism. And to respond to it, Amanda Suknik, seen here smiling before dropping the most uncomfortable question in the room, was invited. The paper itself, titled Antinatalism and Purity, argues that both major forms of antinatalism, misanthropic and philanthropic, have a purity problem. Antinatalism often tries to escape moral complicity in a suffering world by imagining that we can keep ourselves ethically clean. The world is messy, filled with serious suffering and unsolvable trolley problems. There are many times while living a normal life when you come across a situation where no matter what you do, you cannot escape causing suffering either to yourself or to others. And the frequency of such situations is so high that human life seems inherently entangled in systems of suffering. So much so that there is no morally pure position available. We are complicit in the crime and we can't help it. Think of other humans we cause suffering to and other non human animals we cause unspeakable suffering to just by living in a society that depends on this suffering. Our society is structured in such a way that being part of this structure sustains us, and being part of it, we sustain this structural system. Our subsistence takes place within this system, and we sustain it merely by eating, buying, and excreting. Our existence is premised on the fact that we consume suffering. But we pretend not to be part of it when we are trying to assert ethical theories. And that's where the point of purity comes in. The paper points out three purities and applies them to two arguments for antinatalism. One of the reasons not to bring another child into existence is the misanthropic argument that humans cause harm to other humans and animals, so let's not bring yet another human here, and so let's not have new children. But the act of having children is an individual one. This is ethical purity. We are suggesting a solution on an individual level for a problem that is on a collective level. The problem lies in how humans are situated within a society and not in new humans themselves. We then take this individual solution to solve global problems like climate change, and this is political purity. So the paper accuses the misanthropic argument of ethical and political purity because the misanthropic argument treats having children like consumption decisions. Treating procreation on the order of other consumption practices tends to come along with pure implications. It focuses on individual virtue instead of structural change. It risks creating moral categories, virtuous antinatalist versus selfish breeders. Misanthropic argument can spawn personalized purity pursuits which draw categorical distinction between virtuous antinatalists and harmful selfish breeders. It assumes background systems like capitalism, inequality are fixed rather than transformable. Those arguments tend to fix those background conditions, thus veiling them from intellectual critique and political action. Misanthropic arguments imagine that simply not having children reduces harm in a clean, morally decisive way, which it doesn't. What about philanthropic arguments? Recall that philanthropic argument is directed towards the child who is going to be born. That child will have to go through the suffering of life while it was not deprived of any pleasures of life before coming into existence. David Benatar's axiological asymmetry is a famous formulation of this argument. The problem is that such an argument has unrealistic expectations of a subjective life. Even a small pain is bad enough to make that life not worth starting. For example, in Better Never to Have Been, Benatar explains the implication of his asymmetry argument. One of the implications of my argument is that a life filled with good and containing only the most minute quantity of bad, a life of utter bliss, adulterated only by the pain of a single pinprick, is worse than no life at all. It is true of the person enjoying this charmed life, marred only by a single brief sharp pain, that as pleasant as his life is, it has no advantages over never existing. This suggests that any pain contaminates life. A good life would require total freedom from suffering. The ideal subject would be free from embodiment and vulnerability. This reflects metaphysical purity, a longing for a form of existence untouched by suffering. The author argues that this ideal isn't recognizably human. It resembles something closer to divine perfection than an embodied life. Now, I should say that the author does not defend pronatalism either. Pronatalism has its own purity problems. And on top of these purity problems, antinatalism has an underlying anxiety about bringing someone into existence. Antinatalist arguments are useful insofar as they gesture toward a hidden anxiety that everyone engaged in normative ethics ought to take more seriously. Both bringing into existence and coming into existence involves inheriting a form of responsibility that one, in principle, cannot live up to. But trying to solve this through a universal rule like never procreate oversimplifies the problem. The paper gives an analogy. If you don't want the other team to score a goal against you, then you can also kick that ball into a lake. That way, you won't lose, but you're not playing the game either. Refusing to play the game of life doesn't resolve the ethical difficulty of embodied existence, it sidesteps it. So, antinatalism's purity tendencies reflect our helplessness before massive system of harm, our discomfort with moral complicity, our desire for clean, decisive ethical solutions. But there is no pure position. There is no clean escape. There is no morally uncontaminated standpoint. An impure ethics, one that accepts complicity, entanglement, and tragic responsibility, is more realistic and more adequate to the world that we inhabit. Amanda Suknik was invited to respond to this paper. Amanda was quick to point out that the focus of antinatalism, or at least the philosophical arguments, is not those who are already existing, but those who will come into existence. The most serious forms of antinatalism are not, in fact, agent centered, meaning the focus is not on those who will be procreating or on parents, but on the child. They are not concerned with what the antinatalist gains or avoids by abstaining. They are concerned with what is imposed upon the person who is created. Amanda brings up the imposition argument. If, as the paper suggests, we are inextricably tangled in the web of suffering, then why should we impose that onto the child by bringing them here? And by continuing to bring new beings into this world, we are just expanding this web of suffering. Accepting that one cannot escape structural messiness does not automatically justify expanding it. The imposition argument survives the purity critique because its concerns lies within the ethics of initiating a new vulnerable subject into that world. Amanda also refers to Julio Cabrera, according to whom antinatalism diagnoses a disadvantage that accompanies birth and argues that imposing this disadvantage on another is ethically problematic. But there's also this thing about David Benatar. Benatar is a sentiocentric antinatalist, meaning he thinks that antinatalism not only applies to humans but also includes other animals. This question of other animals has divided the antinatalist community. Some are opposed to including other animals in it, while others only extend their circle of antinatalism to include animals that are bred by humans, like farmed animals, for example. Yet others stretch antinatalism to also include wild animals, indeed, any sentient beings. This has caused two things: division of opinion and practical challenges. One can dream of some extinctionist utopia, but the real path to it is full of moral obstacles and impurities. The aspiration to end suffering, harm, manipulation may come from a place of pure moral concern, but the terrain is ethically disorienting and not hygienic. For the sentiocentric antinatalists, there really is no clean way to implement what they want, and so the critique of purity misfires here. Contemporary antinatalism has been marked by an increasing recognition of impurity of the structural, ecological, and political entanglements that make clean extinctionist solutions impossible. That is also why antinatalism has seen a lot of attrition over the years. And this is not because of purity ethics. In fact, quite the opposite. Antinatalism is not attractive because it is pure. If anything, its persistent impurity repels many who once found it compelling. But there is a different kind of purity problem among antinatalists, which Amanda recognizes. This is where some antinatalists ignore reality and dream of achieving easy extinction. This is a different purity problem that sometimes emerges, namely the imagination of total, frictionless solution in regard to extinctionist dilemmas. One encounters visions of universal voluntary extinction, unanimous global coordination, or hypothetical red buttons that would painlessly erase sentient life. Such dreams of cordially coordinated voluntary extinction obscure the problems of the real world. Amanda calls this magical thinking and purity fantasy. But Benatar's antinatalism, as criticized in the original paper, is not purity. And once it includes other animals, ethical questions start immediately. The implications of antinatalism, when taken seriously at the level of sentient life as such, generate moral conflict rather than moral hygiene. They expose tragic trade offs, uncertainty, and residual harm. And yes, red button experiments are discussed, but with the recognition that these are merely thought experiments because reality is far more difficult than magical fantasies. That's why the impurity is not a deviation from the theory, it is what emerges when the theory is allowed to confront the real world. I just want to say that Amanda has provided a nice response, and thanks to her for being there. Another attack on Benatar's axiological asymmetry is in the upcoming paper by Jasper Lougheed, The Problem with Evaluating the Comparative Prudential Value of Procreation Asymmetrically. It's a 29-page paper and focuses on comparisons made in Benatar's axiological asymmetry. For example, if you think of non-existence as having a neutral value and hence being better than a miserable life, then it is also worse than a happy life which has positive value. There are many logical points Jasper makes to disprove the axiological asymmetry. I am not going to explicate each and every detail here, but you can go through the paper to see the criticisms. There is a new conference called Natalism 2026 coming up at the Christopher Newport University in Virginia in the US. It will be from 13th to 15th of March and will address many questions around having children. Questions like, is there a moral directive for or against having children? Are there any virtues in having children? And are there any vices of having children? From the parent's perspective as well as from the child's perspective, and so on. Of the many questions listed on their page, two refer to Mati Hairi and Schifrin's arguments. Is there a morally acceptable risk in bringing new people into the world, as Hairi suggests? Is some sort of consent needed to bring future persons into the world, as Schifrin suggests? So I'm looking forward to the presentations at this conference. If you happen to know more about this, please let me know. Lawrence interviewed Kirk Lougheed, who is the author of Christian Antinatalism, Reconsidering the Theology of Procreation. This is about a slim overlap between antinatalism and Christianity, which is regarded as a pro-natalist religion largely. In this interview, which was about the book in particular, they zoom in on and around this slim overlap. Kirk explains the relation of four of David Benatar's arguments: the philanthropic argument, the misanthropic argument, quality of life, and the lack of cosmic meaning, and their relation to Christianity. There was also a discussion about Christian exclusivism and Christian universalism across different Christian sects and their relation to antinatalism and pronatalism. This, I think, was the meat of the matter and very interesting to listen to. Then they also talk about some objections to Christian antinatalism, antinatalism in other religions and faiths, some biblical references that seem antinatalist or pronatalist, the Gnostics, who were a Christian sect but regarded flesh and the body as something unsacred, the situation of Christian antinatalism today, and also about Kirk's another paper where he is responding to Theodos Metz on why the expectation of cosmic meaning is not unreasonable. A channel called Rethinking made a 10-minute video about his journey into antinatalism. He explains how he got into reading books, which then led him into antinatalism. This is a nice inspirational video for those looking for resources on antinatalism, and David Benatar appears prominently in it. Those were some of the updates about antinatalism this week. Thanks for watching and see you next time.